Hey everyone, I'm calling the October 22nd, 2024 Beaverton Urban Redevelopment Agency meeting to order. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Board Member Duggar,
I'm here.
Hartmeyer Prigg,
Here.
Hassan,
Here.
Kimmy,
Here.
Teeter,
Here.
Tivnon,
Here.
Beatty,
Here.
Kim,
Here.
Ulvin,
Here.
Blair,
Here.
and Ashley, I'm not certain, is Sarah Walton still on the board or?
I'm here.
Stop on.
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand.
Sorry.
She just joined. Okay, thank you. No, all present.
All right, thank you. Well, first on our agenda is visitor comments. Visitor comment allow visitors to speak to the Bureau Board about matters not included on tonight's agenda or matters on tonight's agenda. Recording secretary, do we have anyone here to address the Bureau Board this evening?
Yes, we have someone online.
Okay, great. So comments are limited to 2 minutes for each person. Videos are not turned on for this portion of the meeting, and visitor microphones are muted throughout the meeting with the exception of the allotted 2 minutes. So a visitor may state their comments and should not expect Bureau members to engage in back and forth dialogue regarding those comments. So if we could please give speaking rights to Angela, and then when you start speaking, you will have 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. My name is Angela Anderson, and I'm the owner of Syndicate Wine Bar. I see on the agenda that there is a discussion about the downtown parking management, and I wanted to supply some more information that'll help you in potentially a very complicated decision-making process. I understand it's a very complicated issue down here, but as a business that is open 6 days a week, mostly in the evening hours, I wanted to bring to your attention some things that aren't reflected in the presentation tonight. The biggest one is the abundance of double parking that happens in the evening hours that blocks off First Street, blocks off driveways, blocks off ADA parking. The double parking happens to be outside. The dining pods are both my business and Topper Me's, where people leave their engines going and exhaust goes into the dining area of our guests. It's become a bigger issue, and the parking, what we call the parking wars happening starting at 5:30 every night, have become a little bit more aggressive with these short-term parking needs. Diners are having a hard time getting to us. They're having a hard time getting down the street. They're having a hard time getting in and out of the parking spots that they do have. But I wanted to add that to the discussion because these are things that not necessarily the parking management team would see when they come around for rounds because they're not here all the time. I do want to implore you in your decision-making process that when you pick where you go out to eat at night, what makes your decision? Is it parking availability? Is it things for your family? Is it mobility? Is it weather? Because we are definitely seeing a decline in diners that are dining out down here. And I just want to be careful with the decisions we make on this specific issue.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you for taking time to call in tonight. Do we have any other visitor comments this evening?
No.
All right, thank you. Next up is our board communications section of the agenda. Do any board members have any information they would like to share with the rest of the board and the executive director? So can you put your name in the chat? Okay, seeing none, we will move to the consent agenda portion of the agenda. Okay, so let me just double check the meeting agenda. So I've got a note in my script, so I just want to make sure I handle this correctly. Okay, so the supplemental budget was intended to be listed under the consent agenda. So I'm going to list the items, and if the board is comfortable, I'll entertain a motion to support the consent agenda with this list of items. So Bureau Bill 2024-83, which is the acceptance of deeds for the PRCA condominium garage, parking and retail units, and Bureau Bill 2024-84, resolution number 2024-065, a resolution adopting a supplemental budget for the fiscal year commencing July 1st, 2024, and making appropriations therefrom, as well as the agenda minutes from January 23rd, 2024 and February 27th, 2024.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items.
Thank you, Board Member Olvin. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Board Member Lair. There's been a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing no discussion, will the recorder please take the vote by roll call?
Board Member Lair,
Yes.
Olvin,
Yes.
Walton,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
Beatty,
Yes.
Tivnon,
Yes.
Teeter,
Yes.
Kimmy,
Yes.
Hassan,
Yes.
Hartmayer Prigg,
Yes,
Duggar,
Yes.
11-0.
thank you. Motion passes. The next item on our agenda tonight, we'll move to the business section. We have two items. So first we'll start with the Bureau Bill 2024-85, the Downtown Parking Management Work Session. Staff will provide a presentation on the downtown parking management strategy, and I will hand it over to Molly.
Hi, good afternoon, board, or good evening, board. Molly's internet may have frozen, but I am here to present until she is available. And so Molly and I are here to kind of chat downtown parking with the board and give some data and some possibilities of or some things to consider when making a broader downtown plan. So tonight.
Sorry, can you state your name for the record, please?
Oh, sorry. My name is Casey Graciano. I'm the parking operations manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey.
If we can go to the next slide. So tonight we're going to give you a few considerations. We're going to discuss the downtown parking overview, some parking strategy options, and then we'll open to discussion with the board.
And I think I'm here. So this is Molly Rabinovitz, the parking manager for the city. And I'm hoping you can hear me.
We can, Molly.
Thank you so much. I apologize for my connection issues. So Casey already gave you our background. Sorry, Casey, I'm going to jump right in. So we'd like to start out by just giving you a couple of things to think about as we go through our presentation, because we're going to go back to these questions and thoughts at the end of our presentation. So our first thought, food for thought is from the conversation that we'll have this evening. We would love to hear your top priority for downtown parking at the end of this, as well as keeping in mind that compliance efforts are a key part of any of the downtown parking strategies we would implement or change or reconsider. And we'd like to get your thoughts on what the continuation of compliance would look like if it's not what the pilot program has sort of represented over the last year and will continue to do through June of 2025. Next slide, please. So just a quick background of, overview of what's gone on in parking over the last few months. We have the downtown parking compliance program that started in July of 2023 and is scheduled to conclude June of 2025. We're monitoring approximately 1,300 parking spaces, public parking spaces on street and in public lots. We've had over 2.1 million data points collected in the first year of the year and a half of the program. And we just closed a survey on October 6th of, 2 weeks ago. And I will tell you that we have some preliminary data from that, but we have not had the opportunity to download all of it because we had 5 narrative questions on it and over 500 responses. So some of that takes some time to kind of download and decode and understand better. We've got our on-street permit program that's both residential and employee. Since the inception of the pilot, we've found that we needed to limit the number of permits that went out because we have a finite number of permit spaces. And so we've kept that program at 175 permits for now. And we do have a wait list as of August of this year. We're also revising the Downtown Management and Action Plan, or DP map, relooking at the project priorities and programs using data-based solutions, so data from this pilot that we've been conducting, to try to create a holistic plan for downtown parking. And the DP map will include implementation recommendations. Next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, thank you. So our downtown parking approach, sort of four major comments, or four major areas that we're looking at. Trying to keep it community friendly and collaborative, continuing our community engagement and cross-departmental work and working with all of our boards, commissions, council, bureau board. We are looking at a multi-user system. We know we have people with different needs, different priorities, looking for multiple parking options, looking for employees and linking up to multimodal and customer first in those short-term spaces. A focus on behavior change. So that was one of the main reasons for going with our Warning First and Ambassador program as part of the pilot, and trying to make sure that everything is data-driven, that we are looking at existing regulations so that we know if we need to change existing regulations, looking at all of the data through our compliance effort. And as I've mentioned, we have millions of points of data, and it will help inform our future regulations. Next slide, please. So just some overview on some of the different things that we have been hearing about and looking at. So our downtown compliance overview, just to give you some feedback on the first year of the pilot program, we issued over 4,000 warnings and over 2,200 citations. Data collection showed that average on-street occupancy was 58%. Average or peak occupancy was around 82%. So many of you have heard me talk about that 85% rule that we in the parking world use as one of our trigger points. So peak occupancy or average occupancy around 85% is usually indicative of a need for some change. So we have over 4,500 hours of data collection out, and some just sort of interesting tidbits. Our top citations have been over the 2-hour parking, parking less than 10 feet from a fire hydrant, or having expired registration tags. Our average daytime session parking, so thinking between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. when most of our regulations are posted, is approximately 1.83 hours, which means that most people are staying under that 2-hour mark. Our average evening, so after 6 p.m., we see that goes over, and we're at 2.34 hours. So we have people staying longer. I'm not going to go into all of this data, but it's just kind of a snippet of what we've collected in the first 3 months of the program and what we've collected in the last 3 months of the program. And I think that the key things to kind of look at here is our average length of stay and how much it's changed. So, average length of stay in a 2-hour zone at the beginning of the program was almost 2 hours. Now it's about an hour and a half. Again, in our 2-hour zones after 4 p.m., so thinking about those last 2 hours of regulation and then into the hours that we don't have regulation, it went from being over that 2-hour range to under 2 hours. And then in the areas that we have no time limit posted, we were seeing an average of almost 4 hours in those areas, and that has come down pretty substantially to just under 3 hours. So when you look at like our peak occupancy changes and our average occupancy changes, they don't look substantially different. but it is indicative that we do have some people that are paying a little more attention to those 2-hour rules, so that they're looking more for parking that meets their time limit needs, their the appropriate needs. So we are seeing some behavior change, and we can get down to the nitty-gritty details of some of this and really see where the behavior has changed. But this is just kind of an overview, and we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty details tonight. Next slide, please. So some of these programs we've been speaking about with the community and with you all. So the downtown parking compliance program, as of right now, again, it started in June of 2023 and it's concluding in June of 2025. It's a proactive, consistent, full-time compliance program. It's data informed. It's enforcing existing and current regulations. It's encouraging compliance of the posted regulations. And we are working closely with our BPD partners and our courts partners and some of our other cross-departmental work. Some food for thought, some possible revisions to a continued program, which, mind you, would require additional agreements and continued collaboration cross-departmentally, is looking at adjusting our hours, our time limits, identifying additional short-term spaces, loading spaces to meet the multiple needs of the community, looking at our current on-street regulations and seeing if they truly meet the needs of our downtown parking. All of this done with continued collaboration, community engagement. And another piece is looking at an administrative adjudication process. That would be a code change, a city code change, but it is something that is not uncommon in the parking world. Next slide, please. Our on-street parking permit program currently has not had many changes in many, many years. It is part of our city code. It is, we've had a lot of development since it was created. So it is a low revenue generator. Our residential permits are free. Our employee permits are $30 a quarter, so $10 a month. And we currently capped it at 175 permits, given the current number of on-street permit spaces, and a wait list began in August. Some code change requirements, but possible revisions to a program like this is looking at everybody renewing at this, quarterly, or at the same time, essentially, looking at our fee types and doing a fee analysis to figure out what the administrative cost of a program like this is. Capping the number of permits given out to individuals or addresses so that there's more to go around, and consider looking at the locations of our current program and seeing if we could come up with ones that would serve the community better. Another one is looking at the separation of employee, which I'm going to mention in another slide, but the separation of employee and residential permit programs. Next slide. Employee parking options. So our current program is that the employee permit zones are the same as our residential zones on street. Again, it's a low revenue generator at $30 a quarter, and there's a wait list, but there's no employee specific parking. Again, with code change, we could consider moving some employee parking off street, looking at other locations for employee parking to better serve the community, establish a separate program from residential, and really work on encouraging shared parking between private parties, since they would know a specific user is on site, instead of just a general public parker. Next slide. So we've heard a lot from all of you and from the community about some paid private parking lots. So our current status is that we don't have a regulation around that other than what is in development code. So any private lot has to meet our downtown development code, but that's all we've got right now. So some possible considerations, which would be new city code, is creating a regulatory program around paid private parking lots, requiring specific agreements and licenses, and this would absolutely require cross-departmental collaboration. And a quick update on the Bureau-owned Beaverton Central Garage. So some new and upcoming programs. We're working with our partners on maintenance and operations adjusted contributions. So we're completing a reserve study right now to look at some over time costs of operating and maintaining the garage, and working with our partners on that. Monthly parking started in the garage on October 1st. So we're 21 days in on that. Monthly bike parking is coming soon. We are making a couple of signage changes and stuff in the bike room to accommodate some monthly bike parking in there. We are adding more payment options to our paid system to Flash. So we will be adding Apple and Google Pay. We are looking into reservations for events. So we've spoken with Bureau in the past about event parking, and we've been trying to figure out the best way to do this in our system and control traffic on the streets and control ins and outs of the garage and time management of that. And reservations is one of those possible solutions. And then we will be going out for an RFP on the maintenance and operations of the program because our current contract expires in June of 2025. So we will be going out before the expiration of that to continue to maintain and operate the garage. We're also looking into working with validations with businesses, as I mentioned, adjusting our fee structure based on the fee study and market demand as more paid parking comes into the community. And then looking at a partnership with the Hyatt House on hotel self-parking. A quick revenue update on it is that we are currently in year 3 of operating the garage. And as of this year, our projection looks like our revenue will cover the cost of our vendor who is doing our operations and maintenance for us, SP Plus. Our year 4 projections with our new programs is actually expected to cover the cost of all of our maintenance and operations. And we are in the process of completing our 30-year reserve study. So other considerations for parking, because this by all means was not exhaustive list, and we've spoken with the community and with the boards and commissions around a number of other topics. Multimodal access, making sure that we can connect all of the different modes that people are using to get to downtown. Emphasis on ADA priority spaces and mobility access. More shared parking and park once options so people aren't kind of moving their car around all day. Construction parking regulations now that downtown is bustling and we've got a lot of zero lot line construction going on. Future considerations for on-street parking. I always have to put it out there. It's always a consideration based on the data that paid parking on street, it may be the appropriate management strategy. And then, of course, the continued collaboration with other downtown projects, the Loop, climate-friendly and equitable community, street seats, festival streets, and all of our partners that are trying to make downtown Beaverton the best it can be. So we're going to circle back to those discussion questions now. And so question 1 is from the conversation this evening. What is your top priority for downtown parking? And our second question is, knowing that compliance efforts are key to the success of other downtown parking strategies, do you envision a different compliance strategy than the pilot after the conclusion of the pilot program in June of 2025? If different, what do you envision? And thank you very much for the time tonight.
Thank you, Molly and Casey, for joining us. To the board, please put your name in the chat if you would like to join in on the discussion or if there's any questions you have. And let's aim to get Molly and Casey the feedback they need. All right, Director Tignon and then Mayor Beatty.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. The first one was you had mentioned the wait list for the permits. Do we have a number for how many folks are currently on the wait list?
Yeah, I think it's 14 right now, and we're making our way through it. Some people aren't taking the ones that are offered, and so we've been chipping away at it over the last month.
Okay, and you said the ones that are offered, what does that mean?
So when a permit becomes available because someone didn't renew the previous quarter or they moved out of the downtown and canceled their permit, the system will send them an offer and saying, this permit that you've been on the wait list for is available for you. They have 3 days to then accept the permit, and if they don't, then it goes to the next person.
Got
And
it. Okay.
we've had a few people not accept them or cancel it or move on. And
Okay.
we've been making
Change
our
their
way through it that
minds
way.
or-
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, to that point about should we go from an annual renewal to a quarterly renewal? I had lived in a high traffic area where parking permits were required for residential. It's in Northwest 23rd, so a lot of parking constraints in that area. And I didn't. I would rather have not had to renew it every quarter as a resident. Typically, you're hoping to stay longer than 3 months at a time. I could see it for businesses perhaps, but that was just a quick little thought that I had. The other question that I had was related to the shared parking opportunities. We've talked about that one in the past. I'm really excited about the potential for that, especially the after hours when those businesses that might own those lots are closed and they're just sitting there empty. Do we have an inventory of all those potential opportunities and businesses? And has there been any kind of like dipping the toe in the water to have some initial conversations with them about pulse point temperature check on if they're open to the idea?
Well, so yes and no. So we do have an inventory for sure, and we have most of the property owners' names that we could reach out. We're trying to help establish a partnership between two private entities in that particular case. So our initial conversations many years back with many property owners is that they were hesitant to let the general public park on their lots after hours because of liability concerns. And we can understand that. This is a slightly different approach in hoping that we could connect employers who have employees that need parking in the evenings in particular to encourage property owners who don't have high traffic in the evenings to provide parking to those specific users. And so the appetite for that, I think, is there. I think it's kind of like, what can we do with employee parking? I think there are still some liability questions that will need to be asked and answered that each individual property owner is going to have kind of a different need and approach to that. So that is, we haven't dived too deeply into that, but we are very encouraged by the prospect of being able to identify the users that would then help kind of calm some of those fears of who's in my parking lot after hours.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And I see lots of folks entering into the chat, so I'm not going to belabor my time, but I'll just say as far as the top priority that I've got, I think it's continuing the good work that you've been doing in this last year of getting all of this data. I'd love to see the split between around City Hall, the Reeser, the parking garage, and behavior up there versus in the Old Town area where I know we're experiencing some pretty significant parking impacts, especially in the evenings and especially Friday and Saturday, I'm guessing, are pretty impacted all the time. In my experience, there's a lot of circling of the block, farmers market aside, because that's its own thing. But I'd say my greatest and top priority is continuing to figure out like how we are utilizing any of those unaccessed spaces right now, that those shared parking possibilities, activating the parking lot we've got in ways that make it just more known and appealing, safe, all of that. And I know that might be a subject conversation that comes up tonight. And I'm also very, very hesitant about the idea of like introducing new fees into the area or increasing fees. I'd like to see us continue to work on behavior based incentives before we start going into more of the punitive fee-based incentives, but very interested to hear what everyone else has to say.
Thanks, Councilor Chivnon. Let's go to Mayor Beatty.
Thank you. I was trying to hold out to not be first, so I guess I'll go number 2 here. I think what's interesting, Molly, is that we've heard this like, oh, I'm concerned about liability. One of the biggest perpetrators we heard that from was US Bank, and now they have paid parking. So they somehow got over their liability concerns by issuing paid parking in their lot, which I don't think absolves them of the kind of lawsuit that might come. And maybe it's a risk reward for them that they're getting paid from customers, they can do it. So that just tells me that there is a price that we just haven't figured out yet on how to navigate this space. And as we know, with how much a parking garage costs, it is way more efficient for us to try to figure out how to basically rent space or work on some kind of liability issue. So I think we need to dig down on that particular issue a little bit more. And with given that this is now, I think, the 3rd paid parking space, it's time for council. It's not a Bureau issue, in my opinion. I don't think Bureau has the right to do this, but the council needs to think about a policy around paid lots that would be on just downtown Beaverton. But similar to what we did with towing, it's probably time for us to put some what we feel comfortable parameters around paid lots operating in the city of Beaverton. And it's easier to do it when there's 1 or 2 lots and there's less of a problem than to wait until we have a lot more of them. And so kind of doing this ahead of that, I think would be a priority for me. I also think we need to dramatically reduce the amount of permits we're giving, or think about zoning it in a way where people that live in the neighborhood are not parking between 5 and 7 in crucial areas for the restaurants, but also during the day for our other retail establishments. If someone has their car parked there all day and people aren't coming, and that's not just residents, that's employees of the district. And so we need to figure out either a better zoning place for people to park maybe further away and employees can walk 2 or 3 blocks to work, or we need to give less permits and likely charge more for them, because this is like taxpayers offsetting the cost of developers not wanting to build enough parking spots for their residential people. And that's really like, I find problematic as we're trying to make a downtown that has people parking for less time, visiting establishments and leaving. And then we're on the same token issuing permits to people to park there as long as they want. That doesn't, those 2 things are like non sequiturs to me. So for me, the kind of top priority is, working through the permit system that we have and have more controls around it. I think annual is too much. I would be a fan of moving more towards quarterly, particularly people are moving in and out really in a lot more in this area. Figure out what we're going to do around paid parking lots. And I also think that we need to look at the time. I mean, I was out with the police chief multiple times this year talking to business owners about all kinds of issues, but obviously parking is the #1 thing that people are concerned about. And so thinking about how long, the parking monitors are only there till 5. They haven't been very responsive to people. Like we heard the earlier public testimony, I've heard from other businesses that people are legally parking in front of driveways, making it challenging. And so I don't feel like we got exactly what we wanted out of this parking pilot, or it showed us where all of our highlights are. I haven't decided which one it is. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's go to Director Laird.
Questions about the parking permits. What determines who gets those permits? Is that something just with the property owners, or was it a list at one point in time? What determines that?
So it's actually in city code. So we have city code around our permits, and the designated area is laid out in city code. So you have to be able to provide either proof of employment or proof of residency within those boundaries. And then it would just be a matter of whether or not there's a permit available within those a permit available. And if you qualify, then the permit is issued.
And if you have a permit, you're just able to continue to renew that?
Yes.
And are we changing the number of permits as there's development, as new places are coming in?
So this is the first time we've put a cap on the program. Program was established probably over 25 years ago. So well before my time at the city. And, it hasn't really seen many changes since. So it's something that if we were to overhaul the code, or not overhaul, but make changes to the code around this program, that the boundaries, the qualifications, all of those things could be looked at that time, but it would be a city code change, so it would go to council and go through that process.
Got it. Okay. The numbers you were showing in terms of, the different time zones, occupancies by year, does that include the library lot, or is that just on-street parking?
I'm going to let Casey answer that, just because I believe I know the answer, but he is my operations guru.
No, the data that we showed is specific to on-street. The Third and Washington lot in general is relatively underutilized, seeing like about a maximum of 19% with a general occupancy around 16%.
Molly, I know that's a personal goal of yours over the last few years, is going to get people to use that. Has there been any change?
Small changes, I will admit. There have been a few, and we do know that people are using that lot a little bit more. We have changed some signage in hopes to kind of encourage it, but we are still grappling with lighting, distance, more signage, things along those lines that kind of really emphasize that lot as available public parking.
Yeah, I know. I saw the BDA had some suggestions around there as well, which sounded reasonable. But to me, I think that would be the top priority. There's a great parking lot that is underutilized, that is right downtown. So whether it's a matter of signing that better for people coming downtown, or to the mayor's point, maybe we're making some of the permitted people park in that lot, or just finding some way to get people to use this space, which is right there, and doing nothing and benefiting nobody if no one is using it. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Kimmy.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah, okay. I think Director Lair asked my questions already, but I just want to have maybe clarifying questions. So I just found out the number of parking lots that's available, or parking spaces, do not include library. And we have been talking about the library parking, how can activate it for the last 2 years, but still not much has been done. So I would love to see more signages, something that should be worked on. And I also talked to some customers who utilize downtown restaurants, and they really do not want to walk 3 blocks, but we have to incentivize them that it's available, it's ready to park, and big signages on the Hall and Watson, so they can come into the parking, so that they don't have to worry about trying to find the parking. And also, I really think that employee parking has to be off streets, so that the customers can utilize parking and visitors can use, and they could utilize library parking for employee parking, and that could save us a lot of spaces and availability. One quick question is that I noticed that the parking in force also expired registration. Is that true? So parking enforcement,
yes,
also give tickets for expired registration.
Yes. So our city code, and I don't mean to be geek on city code, but city code 6.02, 0.310.
Okay. Thank you. I didn't know that. Yeah, so that is
has a number of has like a list of questions, and the agreement with the BPD.
Yeah, so my priority would be a lot more available street parking for the retail stores that's there, and also activate the library parking space. And third is trying to move employee parking to off street, so that there's more available streets for customers. So that's my input today. Thank you.
Molly, you were kind of cutting in and out. Was there anything you wanted to add about the code piece?
Yeah, thank you. I apologize. Mainly just that our agreement with the BPD was to allow our ambassadors to enforce this certain code, and that is what they've been doing.
Okay, thank you. Director Olvin.
Thank you. Mayor Beatty addressed most of my thoughts as far as priority is just activating and maximizing for those retail spaces, since that's, that was the premise of using urban renewal monies for that. And I like the prospect of zoning so that some of the folks that are there longer, residents and otherwise, might have to be a little further away, but then it doesn't hamper the commerce and activity within the zone. And I appreciated all the metrics and analytics that you were able to do through the pilot. I think as long as, you continue to evaluate that so that you can make changes, I thought it was really comprehensive. That's it for me.
Thank you. Director Teeter.
Yeah, thanks. When I talk about parking, when we think about parking in downtown, we talk about a parking strategy. I think back something actually Councilor Duggar's husband said once in a neighborhood association committee meeting. The focus is often on accessibility and making sure people have access to the places that they want to go. And so that's the frame of mind I bring into these conversations. With that in mind, I really like the letter that Central Beaverton NAC and the BDA wrote together for us as testimony, talking about improvements for Washington Avenue, for ways that we can make that better lit or more comfortable for people. And that would be that'd be a priority for me. Not just encouraging people to park in that farmers market library lot, but making it very comfortable. I would support moving towards paid parking or exploring it more for on-street spaces. And the reason why I say that is because if we price on-street spaces, that would encourage more people to use those off-street lots, especially if we're able to get some shared parking agreements between some property owners off-street. That would open up some of those on-street spaces for shorter-term customers and visitors. That said, when I was with the BDA, we had a lot of these conversations with business owners and heard a lot of these liability concerns. So if there are ways that we can kind of help incentivize some of these property owners, maybe this is a program revenue discussion later on. Maybe it's if we're getting revenue from on-street parking or from parking permits, we can use some of that to offset some of the concerns or fears that people have. Just a thought that's running through my head. I also appreciate Angela's comment earlier about double parking. I've noticed that a lot myself too, when I'm driving or when I'm riding my bike, and it feels very dangerous. So I would support some enforcement of that sort of behavior, as well as updating our hours, because our peak capacity are those evening hours. And I think I would have a desire to have a greater focus there. And I think that's it for me, but I like the direction this is going, and I would love to see us keep moving forward with some of the walkability, bikeability improvements, and just making sure we're getting the turnover in on-street spaces.
For some reason, I thought
Let's go to Councilor Duggar.
Hey, thanks. I'll try to be quick. Two of my priorities, and I'm going to break them down a little bit, are going to be parking capacity in the evening, and then short-term parking for delivery. And that alludes to what both Councilor Teeter and Angela mentioned. That is. I'm so glad you guys brought it up. It is a very big problem for those of us. I'm downtown. You guys, I know I live downtown, and I'm there all the time. But let's look at it from a capacity perspective, right? So part of this, honestly, our spots are too big. Like if you go to Portland, I think every one of our spots are marked to park a Chevrolet Suburban. And I think that's ridiculous as far as limiting the amount of capacity. We could easily fit more spots with the existing street footage. There's way too many lots, obviously not open to public parking. You guys have heard that. Like there's two at Second and Angel. There's the Banks. There's First and Hall. There's I could name a number of them off the top of my head. Like if we could figure out how to pay for that, as the mayor said, rent that capacity, that's going to be way cheaper than constructing. I know that the BDA did try that with some success, but doesn't have the budget for that, right? So this might be a great use tying into our next agenda item on program. I also think, I think Councilor Teeter mentioned this, maybe someone else, about reviewing the hours of the program, right? Like most of the problems we're receiving are not during the day. And I think the data showed that it's in the dinner rush time.
Megan changed it.
Especially on Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, it's almost impossible to find a spot. But the opposite is true the other days and during the other times during those busy. I also think about things from an experience perspective, right? Are there ways we can invest in smart parking technology, right? Can we direct folks to the existing available parking, you know, at the farmer's market, the library, right? Like people just don't think about that. I always tell people that's it. But think about like going to the airport and you go to the garage, and I know on-street parking is different than a garage, but those little green lights direct you to the open spots. Like there's got to be solutions out there that we could look at investing in that make the experience of parking downtown not feel so awful. I also, I love what Councilor or Director Teeter said about the testimony we received from the BDA on Washington Street. Like that's a brilliant, especially when I think about experience, right? If we did really good lighting from the farmers market to the main kind of First Street area of downtown, that would be really great. Right now it's pretty dark over there, even though I think the city's added some lighting, it's still pretty dark if you go at night, especially in the winter, especially when it's raining. Maybe there's like covered spots or covered something we can do. Maybe there's artwork on the way just to make a really great experience so it makes people want to park there instead of feeling like they have to compromise. At the end of the day, though, just as Councilor Teeter said, like parking has to be part of an overall strategy to increase access to downtown. How do we get folks downtown as easy as possible in a multimodal way? You know, are there programs to encourage folks to use transit and bike and walk if they can? We know a lot of Beaverton is not accessible to do that. I think we need options presented to us as an overall downtown access management strategy. I really don't like looking at just parking because without looking at those other things as part of an access strategy, because it really gives us a false sense of like we're doing something, right? That should be one part of an overall access program. And I hope we step back and take a look at it that way. That's all I have.
Councilor Hassan.
Yeah, my colleagues have all said such beautiful things that I will not reiterate all of them. I do want to take a moment and honor like the testimony that we got from BDA and the chair, and also Angela from the business. I think there are some valid points that they brought up. When I think of your question, Molly, because I was trying to think of that slide with the question, what are my, what are my priorities for parking? I originally wrote safety and clarity, and safety is feeling like I can safely park, which goes back to, I think, what Councilor Duggar was talking about, which is lighting, so that I can park somewhere and walk somewhere, and clarity was around, can I park here? What are the limits around parking here? What does that look like? Which goes into the partnership with like private lots, for example. And then Councilor Teeter made me want to add accessibility, because I think that's also a big piece of it. Can I get to the place that I need to go? So like at a high level, those are my 3 priorities. The things I want to elevate that I heard, I like the idea of looking at regulating private lots. I think that's something that a direction that I think I would support us moving into. I definitely want to do more to find a mix of supporting customer parking and employee parking, and like what that balance is. And I trust that you and staff are working towards that. I liked the mention of, moving towards potentially cost for on-street parking to encourage behavior to go towards the direction of lots. The last thing I will say, and this didn't come up in this conversation, but I think maybe it came up in our briefing, was compliance. I think as we start moving towards compliance, I just want to be thoughtful of how much we're putting on our PD versus other systems. So as we move in that direction, what does it look like so that we're not putting more pressure on our police officers to do compliance, and finding ways to do that in a way that allows them to do the work that they're doing of keeping the community safe. I will say, like, just to close it out, like safety, I do sometimes, especially to Counselor Duggar's point, like when I'm walking in Central Beaverton around Beaverton City Library, like I do find myself like on the phone to be like, hey, I'm walking, like just because it doesn't always feel really great. And so thinking about like lighting, we've talked about wayfinding. So I will let you all hopefully be inspired by my words. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Walton.
Yeah, I'll be short. I don't have much of a voice, if you guys can hear me. Yeah. Okay. My only thought is, again, been reiterated multiple times, but just real quickly is like the turnover at the times that we need turnover. And I think Mayor Beatty said it, like where this teeters between a council decision and a bureau decision. And the bureau sort of point was around businesses and like sort of the flow. I think everything else can be a council conversation. And so if the parking is accomplishing that, and I think that the data shows that there's some improvements, but I think in those timeframes that we're talking about or hearing from Angela earlier on the business front, I would challenge us to continue to think about the times that these businesses need success and if it's accomplishing that. And it's great that we tried something because that's what you do and you learn and you grow. And the point of this wasn't we got it right all the way the first time. And I know to the team that worked hard on this, that wasn't the goal. It's to learn and try something. So like I would just continue to push us to continue to evolve and learn and try, and it's not failure. If we evolve from here, because we're listening to the community and learning. So that's all.
Thank you, Director Walton. I echo the sentiments of my colleagues on the board. I think the comment about the double parking is pretty concerning to me as well. There's just so much safety issues that are tied up in that, and we're really aiming to make that area so much more safe. And I think it's already like that intersection at First and Watson kind of can feel like a game of Frogger. And then if you add in the double parking, there's nowhere to go on First Street. So I think that just kind of seeing that and then hearing from our community about it, it makes me kind of curious about, is part of the pilot testing out those hours, right? Do the enforcement hours maybe differ a little bit? Do we extend? Because I do think catching the double parking, like that to me is the type of violation that deserves a citation. Like that's actually probably one of the areas that I would be I guess potentially punitive with, because I think it just really causes a safety issue. However, I think we have solutions to also help prevent it from happening, right? To Councilor Duggar's suggestion, whether that's a 5-minute zone or whatever for pickup and things like that. I think that I'm really curious about exploring getting us into the street lots, whether they're private, whether that's the library lot, and keeping the on-street parking for the folks who just have the accessibility needs, the folks that need to be able to have that close spot or have that quick in and out pickup. That would be my preference for some of those areas of the street parking, open to potentially paid street parking. Yeah, so those are my comments. I think we heard from almost everyone. Dr. Kim, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh, not Dr. Kim, but no, I just and I think everybody pretty much spoke. I don't want to take up time, but I think it's interesting that the parking problems happen because a community who is used to decades of suburban lifestyle and being able to park right in front of where they want to go at all times, all of a sudden becomes more dense and more urban, and all of a sudden you have 500 people living a few blocks and there's a restaurant there and people can't park right in front. So I think all that we're doing, all the effort is going to solve that problem. But the problem is two ways. One is all the stuff that we're talking about, lighting, wayfinding, employees, being able to use the existing lots. But the other side of this whole thing is the community being used to being in an urban area. And I think that's where the behavior comes from. And I think that should also be pushed because it's becoming more urban. So parking is different than what we were used to in the last decades. So I appreciate everybody's efforts. I think Molly's doing great, and just continue to push the behavior part, because we as a community all have to get used to being in an urban area. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Molly and Casey, do you have what you need from the board this evening?
Yes, thank you so much for the time and for the input. We really appreciate it. And I apologize for my popping in and out. I'm on my way to a parking conference. Well, not on my way. That starts tomorrow morning. So I'm not in my usual location. And so thank you for bearing with me. And we will be back with more. So thanks again.
Sounds good. And no worries at all, Molly. All right. Let me just see. I think I'm going next to, okay, yeah, sorry. I was looking at the wrong part of the script. Our next agenda item is the Bureau Program Income discussion. And so I'm going to hand it over to Janine.
Good evening, Bureau Board. Janine Lambert, Senior Development Project Manager in the Community Development Division. Here I have the easy job of just introducing Nick Popenick from Tiberius Solutions. Nick has been integral in our work previously with the Bureau 5-year action plan, which has led to this next body of work, the program income strategy, program income policy work that we're here to talk about tonight with some draft policy proposals. So Nick, take it away.
All right, thank you for that introduction. Glad to be back here virtually with all of you. I know that you guys have a full agenda tonight, so I think we'll sort of dive right in here. This is not the first time I've been with you talking about program income, and it won't be the last time either, because this is intended to be a collaborative process as we work with you all, we work with URAC, and we work internally with city staff to make sure that we're coordinating on all the policy language that we bring forward. Today, we are going to be talking about program income just as a refresher. Then we're going to be going over, for the bulk of the presentation, our high-level program income policy proposals. This is not the nitty-gritty final details. We have not done wordsmithing and fleshed out every one of these ideas in great detail. This is where we're identifying in broad strokes what we think the policy needs to include. So that we can get your input tonight to see, did we get everything? Is something missing the mark? Are there things that you need more clarity on? And then after we go through those, we'll talk about the next steps on this project. And then we have a few specific questions for you, as well as looking for any input and questions that you have. So those questions that we'll be asking of you at the end of this presentation, do you have any concerns about any of the broad policy proposals that we're presenting today? Is there anything important that you think these policy proposals have missed? And are there any details you want to make sure are addressed in the refined, detailed policy language that we bring back later this winter? So what is program income? Again, this is not the first time we've talked about it, but in the shortest way to define it is by what it is not. So it is any revenue that is being received by an urban renewal agency other than TIF or the debt proceeds secured by TIF. And the common examples are land sales, rents, loan repayments to Bureau, parking revenues, and fines and fees. So those are very common examples that we see with Bureau and elsewhere. What makes program income a different tool is that it's not subject to the same restrictions as tax increment financing. Most importantly on that is that it's not subject to maximum indebtedness. So your plan has its maximum indebtedness limit. And once you've hit that maximum indebtedness limit, you can no longer use tax increment finance revenue to fund the projects in the plan. In addition to that, your plan, because it was approved by voters, has specific category expenditure limits that cannot be exceeded for the tax increment finance revenue for the maximum indebtedness portion of the projects. But you could use program income to spend more in those particular categories and help shift dollars around from what was maybe originally intended 20 years ago when the plan was adopted to reflect priorities today. And then geographically, all of your tax increment revenue has to be spent inside the boundaries of the plan area, but that limit does not exist for program income. It could be spent anywhere in the city. So those are all key differences between program income and your tax increment revenue. That being said, program income is not a completely limitless piggy bank. There are some restrictions on it, and generally speaking, those restrictions are limited to the general powers of urban renewal agencies in Oregon. Now, there's a long list in statute of specific powers that urban renewal agencies have, but at the end of that list, we have the quote we see on screen here: to engage in any other housing or community development activities specifically delegated to it by the governing body of the municipality. So if there's anything related to housing or community development anywhere within city limits, as long as the city council designates that responsibility to Bureau, then that's an eligible expense of program income. So pretty wide latitude there. So without further ado, we now made it to our list of proposed policies. There's 15 of these, so we're going to read through all of them fairly quickly here, and then we'll have a chance to discuss them and go back and dig into them as needed. And again, keep in mind, this is just the policy proposals. This is the broad direction that we think the policies need to cover. We have not tried to get into the nitty-gritty details of these. Some of them are going to be, I think, more meaty than others and are going to need to have a lot more details fleshed out, whereas others may remain a pretty brief, 1 or 2 sentence statement. So, proposal number 1, program income is a valuable resource to allow Bureau to achieve its goals and objectives. Number 2, generating program income is a subordinate goal to other adopted Bureau and city goals. 3, when structuring public-private partnerships, Bureau should consider the public return on investment. Program income generation is a component of public return on investment, but other components include increasing taxable assessed value, the number of housing units created, affordability of housing units created, and jobs created. Number 4, in the context of the public return on investment and subordinate to other adopted Bureau and city goals, Bureau should seek to maximize proceeds from land sales when disposing of Bureau-owned property. Number 5 is similar in the context of public ROI and subordinate to other adopted Bureau and city goals. Bureau should seek to maximize lease income when managing Bureau-owned property. Number 6, when structuring public-private partnerships, Bureau should consider loans as more favorable than grants in situations where the revenue from loan repayment exceeds the costs of administering the loan, and provided that city staff has capacity to administer the loan programs. Number 7, the payment terms, including amortization period and interest rate, for loans made by Bureau should be more favorable to borrowers than terms offered by private lenders, and the loan application process should be streamlined to ensure Bureau loans are an attractive tool for developers. Number 8, parking garage rates should be set at appropriate levels to effectively manage parking demand with the intent of maintaining an optimal number of vacant spaces. Rates charged for parking garage use and for parking violation fees and fines should not be set with the purpose of maximizing revenue. Number 9, the rates for parking fines and fees should be set at appropriate levels to deter the offending behavior in line with rates charged by comparable jurisdictions. Number 10, parking garage revenues should be spent on the following in order of priority: A, parking garage maintenance and operations; B, parking garage reserve fund; and C, other eligible uses of program income. 11, Parking garage revenues should be used to fund a parking garage reserve fund of up to a target amount of X million. That amount is to be determined, but your parking staff are doing work on that right now, based on annual depreciation. This target amount should be updated in future years based upon the estimated potential future costs of renewal and replacement. 12, parking compliance revenue should be spent on the following in order of priority. A, cost recovery for collection and adjudication of fines and fees. B, parking compliance operations. And C, other eligible uses of program income. 13, eligible uses of program income include the following in order of priority. A, public projects within the Central Beaverton Urban Renewal Plan area identified in the plan that would otherwise have insufficient funds due to the limited allocation of maximum indebtedness authority. B, the extension of public projects and programs identified in the plan beyond the geographic boundary of the plan area. C, projects and programs that are not identified in the plan but would be located within the plan area. And D, other economic development activities anywhere in the city that are not identified in the plan, but are specifically authorized by the City of Beaverton and delegated to Bureau and agreed to by the Bureau Board. 14, for any use of program income other than funding a public project within the plan area identified in plan, or specific powers granted by ORS 457, the City of Beaverton must specifically authorize Bureau to undertake the activity consistent with the limitations of ORS 457. 15, the ultimate decisions on the expenditure of program income will be made by Bureau during the annual budget process. All right, we made it through the long list. Thank you there. So there are a couple of those that are maybe a little bit more substantial than the others, or represent more of a departure from what you're already doing. So a lot of those things are already on the table and are already part of your common practices, but some of them would be a departure or would require really new policies and new programs and a new way of running Bureau. So for those, we'd like to take a deeper dive and a closer look. In particularly, we're looking at this concept of loans versus grants. So the policy proposes that, in general, loans would be more favorable to Bureau than grants. And the pros of doing that are long-term revenue generation. Anytime that you can offer a loan rather than a grant, that means that there's money coming back to Bureau, program income coming back to Bureau that you're going to be able to use to fund more projects in the future. The cons of doing loans versus grants is that it has a higher administrative cost to the program and is less attractive to private developers. As this policy moves forward, if we hear from you tonight and from URAC when we meet with them in a couple of weeks that this is a direction that you want to go in, we'll need to work out details on under what circumstances should loans be offered instead of grants, and what are the appropriate financing terms. A couple of examples of jurisdictions who have taken this sort of approach include Prosper Portland. Prosper Portland, you can actually see on the slide here a snapshot from their website on their key loan program terms. So they've got a pretty advanced loan program. They have spent the last several years intentionally pivoting away from TIF to focus more on program income, given that many of their urban renewal areas are close to shutting down. They also happen to generate more program income than any other urban renewal agency in Oregon, and they have more staff capacity to establish and oversee loan programs. So for all those reasons, they are definitely more advanced than any other urban renewal agency when it comes to offering loans. It also means that the way that they've structured their program is not necessarily something that Beaverton, with lower revenues and a smaller staff able to oversee these things, this is not exactly a program that you may want to copy, but it's an example of what we can see from elsewhere in the state where this has been done. So they have very detailed policies already established that allow them to work with potential borrowers and set these very clear expectations on what that interest rate is going to be, what the loan term is going to be, how much equity contribution the private developers need to make to the project, the maximum combined loan to value ratio. So they've specified all of these things up front so that there's not a whole lot of negotiating on an individual project basis, but they've got clear loan program terms from the get-go. The city of Springfield's another example that I've been involved in. It's an example of a program that they set up, but ultimately never executed because of where market conditions went. Back right before the pandemic, they were working with a local property owner who had partnered with a regional developer and was looking to develop in their downtown, and were originally approaching the city's urban renewal agency for a grant to be able to make that happen. As they worked on that negotiation, given the high expected or required return on investment from the equity investors on the project, the urban renewal agency was going to need to put in a pretty sizable grant in order to make the project pencil out. The city talked with the local property owner and the developer and said, what if instead of that grant, we just take the private equity guys out of the equation and we lend you the money to be able to get this project done instead. And the city was able to look at that with a much more favorable rate of return than what the equity guys were demanding. And so it was able to make the project pencil without having to give a huge amount of grant subsidy to the project. And the urban renewal agency was going to be compensated for their investment long term with favorable terms, where they were going to have interest only payments for a number of years and all these things. But ultimately, they would be getting their money back. It was going to require them to, I think, triple the amount of upfront investment they were making. But for that increased investment upfront, they were going to have a much larger direct return on investment down the road. And they had everything squared away with their legal counsel, with the banks that they were working with, the property owner, the developer. Everything was set. But over the past few years, as interest rates kept creeping up and up and up, eventually the project reached a point where it wouldn't pencil out. And so they tabled it for the time being, but potentially to come back as interest rates are projected to decline in the coming years. But that approach, even though the project didn't pencil out, that approach has stuck with the city. And they certainly are more interested in pursuing those types of loan agreements than they are giving out grants to public-private partnerships in the future. One more area we wanted to take a closer look is on the eligible uses of program income. The proposed policy has sort of 4 buckets of eligible uses that are prioritized, with the top priority being sort of the most restrictive and the lowest priority being the most flexible. So the most restrictive being, let's focus on projects that are identified in the plan and are in the plan boundary. The most flexible being any project, as long as the city gives you direction to use it, anywhere within city limits. So the pros of the approach that we've come up with is that it focuses on the adopted plan and on the voter approved project list. So it's staying close to what your adopted priorities are. But long term, as those projects are completed, it does allow more flexible uses in the long run. The cons of this approach is that it does restrict the flexibility of the funds until after you've completed the planned projects and have made investments as needed inside the boundary. Examples are rare in Oregon, just because there have not been, other than Prosper Portland, very many examples of urban renewal agencies that have collected enough program income that their urban renewal agency has lived on beyond the maximum indebtedness and beyond the ability to use tax increment financing. There are a few examples of jurisdictions that have had small amounts of program income, and after they have closed down an urban renewal area, they've used those funds to pay for feasibility studies to look at other investments elsewhere in the city. But again, we're going to see here that Prosper Portland is really the pioneer in this area. And they do have a specific policy on this front. They have directly dealt with this issue themselves. Their policy is that if the program income is generated within an urban renewal area where they have recently adopted what they call a TIF district community action plan, really a 5-year priority plan, just like we recently went through with Bura. If they have one of those 5-year plans in place for the urban renewal agency or for the urban renewal area, and the funds are coming from the area, then they limit the use of the program income to projects identified on the 5-year action plan. But if the funds are being generated from beyond that urban renewal area, or if it's in an area that has not adopted one of those 5-year action plans, then they view those dollars as being available to pay for any project that fits within the statutory definition anywhere citywide. So they kind of do both versions of it, depending on, out of their dozens of urban renewal areas, whether they happen to have adopted one of these 5-year action plans. If you look in other states, particularly in the Midwest and East Coast, where they've had urban renewal as a tool dating back 70 plus years, in those areas, many of the original urban renewal areas have long since finished the mission that they set out for decades ago. But the property that they acquired along the way has allowed them to continue making real estate investments that generate more program income from them. And they certainly wind up being a source of funding for citywide economic development investments. But those experiences from outside of the state don't give us much valuable lessons learned for the policies we're trying to write today for Bura. Maybe 40 or 50 years from now, if somebody else is working on tweaking these policies, they may be more useful examples at that point in time. And some details that will need to be included in this policy, assuming that we get direction from you and from URAC to move forward in this direction, would be when and how should Bura and the city decide to branch out beyond the projects that are in the plan. In terms of next steps on this project, so we're meeting here tonight to talk about our policy outline. Next month, we're going to be having the same conversation with URAC. In December, then, we'll take your feedback and URAC's and work with city staff to draft up the more detailed and specific policy language. We will come back to you in January to present that draft policy language. We'll share it with URAC in February. And then once we have all of that feedback, we will make revisions to it, including legal review, though we certainly have had legal review and input already. And that tees up for hopefully having the final policy language ready for you to consider and adopt in the March timeframe. So we'll be in front of you 2 more times and in front of URAC 2 more times, as well as working a lot with city staff as we work on crafting this final language. And with that, to repeat the questions that we posed at the beginning of the meeting, do you have any concerns about any of the broad policy proposals presented today? Is there anything important that you think these policy proposals have missed? And are there any details you want to make sure are addressed in the refined, detailed policy language? So thank you for bearing with me through that fairly lengthy presentation.
Thank you so much, Nick, and thank you, Janine, for being with us this evening. Are there any questions or comments for our presenters this evening? All right, we'll start with Director Olvin.
Okay, so I don't think that any of these policy proposals would lengthen the amount of time that a plan would exist, but can you clarify for me if that, so it doesn't affect MI, but would it potentially extend the life of the plan?
It may extend the life of the plan, but not of what I think is most important to TVF&R, which is the ability of the plan to collect tax increment revenue. So the timeline for hitting maximum indebtedness, paying off that debt, and ceasing to collect tax increment revenue, that's completely unchanged by any of these proposals. But the plan could continue to exist separate from any tax increment revenue for years beyond that, if it was still a useful planning document and if you had other revenue sources that could continue to implement the projects and the vision articulated in that plan.
Okay, perfect. So probably this speaks to all 3 of the questions. The only concern that I would have is just making sure that the policy spelled that out, you know, for any future policymakers or decision makers, so that there wouldn't be any unexpected reason that the plan would live longer than needed, just for the impacts to the overlapping taxing districts. And that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Lair.
Nick, thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask a question about the item number 7, which is the loans. So there's a number of ways that you can be a more favorable lender. I think if I understood your examples correctly, Prosper Portland was giving better terms, maybe lower rates, better duration terms, and Springfield was going a different route, which was maybe making riskier loans than comparable lenders would. I guess a third way would be just making the process of getting the loan easier. Do you have a recommended preference? Would it be some combination of all those? How do you think it would be best for Bureau to be a favorable lender?
Yeah, I think it's going to depend. I think on the slide we talked about sort of the next steps or the things that we need, the details that would need to be included in the next round of language is identifying really what are the loan programs or what are the grant opportunities today that would make the most sense to turn into loan opportunities in the future. And for some loans, if they're small dollar amounts, if they're intended to, be for tenant improvements or something like that, you might want to have a really clear-cut program and make the terms really favorable because you're trying to encourage the businesses to conduct that activity. When you start to have programs for public-private partnerships for large-scale development, where you're talking about millions of dollars of Bureau funds being invested into a private project, that's where you really want to be clear about, well, what are we trying to accomplish and how attractive do we need to try to make this? In the city of Springfield example, they have not had new market rate residential development in their downtown in decades. In Beaverton, you do. So you don't need to have a loan program to try to subsidize a market that doesn't exist in Beaverton. You have other goals here that you're trying to accomplish. And so, we will need to work with city staff to identify sort of what are the specific loan programs that we can envision here and how aggressive, how favorable do the terms need to be to make that an attractive offer and still to have the type of economic activity that you're looking to see accomplished. I don't think you need to try to be as aggressive as Springfield, completely eliminating equity investors in a project, putting in a very large percentage of the overall capital stack into the project and giving, interest-only terms for a very long period of time. But you may wind up being more favorable sort of loan terms than Prosper Portland, just because the market conditions in Beaverton and the market conditions in downtown Portland are different. So,
got it. That makes sense. I think my feeling on that is that certainly if you can offer favorable terms, lower rates, the kind of things that'll help a project that wouldn't otherwise pencil out, I think that's a great thing. That's exactly what Vera is trying to accomplish. We're not a profit maximizing entity. I feel a lot more comfortable with that than risking taxpayer capital, taking out equity capital in projects like this. That's a different thing to me. I don't know that I'd be as excited about that.
I think that makes a lot of sense considering your market compared to the examples that we looked at.
Thanks.
Thank you. Director Teeter.
Thank you, Nick. I've got 2 questions and then 1 comment. The first one, if we can go to 13D. I'm reading this one that says that funding after looking at A, B, and C, after those are kind of examined, funds could be authorized outside of the Bureau district. Can you talk more about this one? Because I'll share why I'm asking about it. I think I've got some hesitation to spending funding that's gathered in the Bureau district outside of that geographic boundary. Can you talk more about what this would actually look like?
Yeah. So, when we were working over the past year on the 5-year strategic plan, we did hear feedback that there are the types of infrastructure investments and the types of grant programs that you've set up inside the plan area that have been successful there, that would be great if the city could expand to other commercial corridors or other parts of the city that haven't benefited from the TIF investments that you've made. And so technically, that would be under B, the extension of those those programs that are already operating in the plan, extending geographically beyond the plan area. D gets to completely new projects and activities outside of the plan area. So that is just the most flexible use of program income. You know, we've checked in with your legal counsel on that, and I also checked in with Prosper Portland on their legal counsel, who have said that yes, you know, their read is that program income can be spent anywhere within the city's geography. And you may wind up having economic development opportunities citywide. And it could be that long term, you have tax increment financing to invest in specific urban renewal plan areas, but you want to still make investments elsewhere that could be covered with program income because it has that flexibility. So this proposal says that, yes, that is an allowed use, but it is still the lowest priority for spending program income if there's anything that you can be doing and funding that's within the plan area or a continuation of a project or program that's already identified in a plan. It's trying to balance those two factors, but you know, it's clearly, I think one of the largest political discussions tonight is how do you feel about authorizing the use of program income to be spent on things outside of the plan?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That helps. Yeah, I feel a lot of caution about doing that, but it is the lower priority there. So I see this kind of giving us a little bit of flexibility. Say we want to start an urban renewal district along Allen Boulevard or something that could help kind of jumpstart those efforts. So I don't think I'd push back against it. I'm just cautious. And then I've got a question about 8 and 9, about parking revenue. Yeah, so parking revenue in number 8 talks about rates being set to effectively manage demand. And I really like that. And I think that touches on our parking conversation just a minute ago. Number 9 for on-street parking, I guess it doesn't specify on-street parking, but parking fines and fees should be set at appropriate levels to deter offending behavior. And I was wondering if something is missing here with my thought of like, should we include managing parking demand on street in this bullet too? So it's talking about garage management, garage demand management and on-street demand management. Wow, that is really hard to say at this late at night.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair comment, and you know, we definitely are getting input from parking staff as we develop the final language here as well, and we've had their input leading up to these original proposals here too. So we'll make sure we're coordinating with them to be clear on the policy when it comes to the rates for those fines and fees and how that relates to on-street demand management.
Okay, thank you. And then my last point is just a comment. I really like the idea of moving towards loans, especially if it helps support some larger or more complex developments that we may have seen fall through in recent years or that might be a little bit more risky. So I love the loan conversation. I would like to talk more about those in the future.
Thank you. Director Duggar.
Hey, thanks. A question, then a couple comments. What happens, say, in a decade, and you know, we've reached the limit of our TIF ability, and we decide that we're going to end Bureau, and there's program money in an account. Does that automatically go to the city?
Yeah, it does. So if and when you terminate an urban renewal agency, all assets and liabilities are assumed by the city that established the agency.
Okay. And then there's a whole other set of rules on how we spend money. So, okay. Couple feedback things on 4 and 5. If you could go to that. I'll be honest, the word maximize here makes me uncomfortable in both of those things. And the reason being is there might be a situation where we don't want to maximize that if it's the right project, right? Or if there's a few bids on a project and there's one that's comes in as less money, but is a better contextual fit for what we think or something like that. So the word maximize there, It might be okay because you did put subordinate to other adopted bureau and city goals, but it just makes me uncomfortable there. My preference would be maybe to eliminate the idea of that and give the staff flexibility there, and give this board flexibility. And then if we could go to number 8, the parking garage rates here. I kind of want to strike that last sentence too, because to me, it's an unnecessary limitation on a future bureau board, right? Like if we say we should limit, should not be set for the purpose of maximizing revenue. What if a future board wants to maximize revenue and the parking demand is really high and they can do it? I don't think we should, it just seems like one of those, this kind of arbitrary, and I don't necessarily want to eliminate. I'm not for maximizing it myself, but I also don't know what the future situation looks like, but I'm kind of flexible on that. Number 11, if we can go to that too. So this is interesting to me, and I'm a big proponent of this, but I think there's a gap, and let me tell you what that gap is. I love this as a concept, right? The first priority should be creating a maintenance fund. All too often we forget about maintenance. I just think that there's a lot of capital projects that Bureau works on too that we haven't thought about that, right? Like Bureau is investing in transportation elsewhere beyond the parking garage, and I want this same model for those as well, right? Like we've got to take maintenance and building reserve funds very seriously. Construction costs have gone way up, and so I love this, and I just want us to think about it for the other Bureau funded capital projects, right? Like, how are we thinking about maintenance of those? Because when all of those assets transfer to the city, that's sort of an unfunded liability, right? Like, we've got to, we're doing all this really cool stuff, but we've got to figure out like how to make that work financially, and if that could come with some maintenance money, I think that's a lot easier to chew on for me. In general, I kind of agree with Councilor Teeter. I'm a big fan of loans versus grants, and I think that's a really creative way. So I'm in full support of that. But just at the highest level, my preference is almost to limit this policy to kind of the barest minimum for things we all agree on that are great, and remove all the things that we think are bad. And here's my thinking there is like I know we've long kind of badgered you guys about creating this policy, and I think it's good, but I do want to maximize flexibility for the future boards, right? Like, and I feel like ORS 457.170 and 457.180 give us a good guideline. And I don't know that we need to limit future boards as much, because number one, they can come in and easily change these rules. So, but secondarily, like it just feels like I'm kind of telling future board members and elected officials how to run their bureau, and their bureau might be very different than ours. And I think I kind of want to give them as much flexibility as possible within the context of what's legal and right for us right now. So in general, I'm kind of a little uncomfortable with some of these, but I'm willing to live with them. Just kind of wanted to put that out there. But I appreciate the work on this. This is definitely a step in the right direction.
Councilor Tidnar?
Thank you. I won't go over the ground that's already been covered, but if you could go back to slide 10, which seems to be the most popular one tonight. It's the one right before that. Slide 10, it's got 7, 8, 9 on it. Okay. So first and foremost, I'd just like to say, I love that we have everything that has come to this point with this particular body of work. It can mesh so neatly into what Bureau is already currently doing, and start opening up this idea of how we can generate some income. And thank you for the way you walked us through all of this, and just the thought and care that went into each one of these. As far as number 9 goes, that last line where it says in line with rates charged by comparable jurisdictions. So one of the things that I think is a careful point to balance in all of this is that parking garage, we want to see it full of people coming down to shop and enjoy their time and make the choice to be there versus other places. And I remember the very first time I went in there and had that experience of seeing what I was going to get charged to be in that parking garage versus virtually every other charged parking garage that I've been in the metro region. The price was so low and astonishingly low in some ways, especially for people who say might be coming in from Seattle or some other large city. There was something very homey and welcoming about that. And so I liked the idea that we were able to keep it so low that people would choose to go into the parking garage and maybe even forego on-street parking, because it was so affordable to be in there. I know that that's unrealistic to keep the prices depressed like that forever. But I also I like swimming against current personally sometimes, and so that's just the only consideration is knowing when to wield this for the revenue versus when to take a lighter touch because we are coaxing people in to use all of the assets that we're developing in this area. Other than that, I'm really excited to see how this is shaping up, and I will yield my time so we can move through everyone else who has comments.
Thank you. Director Kimmy.
Oh, as always, thank you for the presentation. I love hearing your voice. Actually, makes me feel comfortable. Just a quick question. How much money are we talking about eventually? Give it next 2-3 years.
It really depends right now, because we are talking about a departure from past activities. Bureau does own a significant amount of property, and there's the potential to buy more, depending on what market conditions do. The ability to turn around and sell those properties could yield millions of dollars of program income. The garage, when it's fully up and running at its full capacity, could also be generating a substantial amount of program income, albeit the proposal here would set aside most of that for operations and for maintenance and all that. But you could have a substantial amount. The biggest chunks of potential program income would be from loans to public-private partnerships, but those are going to be very opportunity driven. And so you could have years where there are no developers that you come to terms with on any sort of a loan. And there could be another year where you're making a multi-million-dollar loan that's going to be generating payments each year of hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it could be volatile, especially in these early years as these new policies are being implemented. But long term, it's certainly the potential for millions of dollars of revenue eventually. So,
okay, that's good to hear. So when we go out of the our boundary, so with the money that we could potentially have, we could invest and start buying land and properties outside our boundary. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is consistent with sort of the East Coast model, where those agencies that were set up decades ago and completed their original missions wound up being sort of players in the real estate and economic development market, using the proceeds from their previous sales or from lease income to then purchase other blighted sites and get those turned back into productive uses and take the money from that to do it at another location and sort of have that revolving approach to acquiring and developing land and moving on to another place that could use the public intervention.
Okay. I'm sorry, I got just 2 more questions. So when we are setting up the policy, is it subject to the city's policy in a way that we have downtown equity strategy, we have a DI plan, and other ways that we are bound to assess whenever there's an opportunity or investment or when we go out into any kind of programs? Is it subject to that, or do we set up our own policy?
Yeah, we originally started to try and look and say, well, could we have a giant matrix looking at each of these proposed policies and how they interact with all the existing other policies and priorities that are out there? And it became a little overwhelming. So our second bullet point here, that generating program income is a subordinate goal to other adopted bureau and city goals. You know, we could clarify that not only to other adopted bureau and city goals, but adopted city policies. So you're right. You know, if there's already a policy in place on DEI, that is going to take precedent over generating more program income. We want to generate program income. We don't want to do it at the expense of all the other priorities that the city and bureau have already established.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. So my other follow-up question would be, city have projects that we have set up already that lacks funding, let's say. We have a court, we have an expansion of the building, we have a community center discussion. So we could potentially use this money for maintenance of our city infrastructure. It's for future value, right? We have to maintain what we have and make it better, and maybe trying to buy a land or building instead of something to the project like a community center or multicultural center. We could start investing in that.
You could, as long as you're able to make the argument that whatever that maintenance and sort of you know, operation expenditure is supporting either housing or economic development activities. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Last comment I have is I would love to use this fund when it becomes available on public housing, affordable housing. We can jumpstart to potentially build a project on Lombard. That could come on for affordable housing and multi-use economic development, right? So I love to see that somehow we can utilize, incentivize, or give a loan, initial development loan to kickstart that. So thank you for that. That's my comment.
Mayor Beatty.
Thank you. As one of only two people in this room that was here when we asked voters for BIRA, me and Cassandra, I think intent to what we ask people for is incredibly important. And I'll give you a side story on why I'm uncomfortable about spending this money outside of the district and on anything other than revenue generating projects, is that the mayors collectively are fighting on city's behalf with the county over MSTEP, which is the taxing money that comes in that we do all of our county-wide roads on. We've been recipients of MSTEP money, other cities have as well, and the current Board of Commissioners and their budgetary issues are trying to take and shave off pieces of MSTEP to backfill their general fund to do other things that the board thinks are really important. The problem the mayors are presenting is like, when we asked voters for this is what we said we were going to use the money for. And so we're kind of like the holders of the original intent. And so I look at that through that same lens here of like taking this money and doing something other than what we told voters we would do for it, spending outside the district. Like, I'm not okay with a policy like that. I don't want to tie the hands of future elected officials, but I don't want to make it so easy that and give them the out to go away from what we've intended to spend this money on. Not only did we tell voters we were going to do one thing, we went to all of our community partners and said, we have this vision, we're the holders of it. We have some on and off over the years have had special districts serving on the board with us, but they don't have as large of a voice that the city and the city council do. And so I want to make sure that we maintain that. And we are like, there's probably no one sitting in this room that's going to be here through all of the development of the rest of this district. And so some of this stuff is so far out, it's frustrating a little bit to be talking about it today. But we have so much to do. We have BC2 site that still hasn't come online. We've bought all this property. There is ways to spend this money to generate the plan that we're already doing. And really going through that lens constantly of, this is not a slush fund. This is not meant to do the council priorities that we think are important. It is to do one thing, to return revenue to a district in an area that had low property tax value. And if we do anything other than that, I don't want to support it going forward. The council has other tools and mechanisms that we can pull to advance our council goals. But going back to this and treating it like it's something that it's not is a little bit concerning to me. And some of the comments I've heard from some of my elected officials today of moving away from that intent is pretty problematic. And I think our city attorney and whoever we go back to this plan to will have strong opinions if we start to do that as well. And I do believe that like some kind of loan program in the future would be something for us to consider and do. I am apprehensive about the staffing required to do something like that. When we hear a lot from staff now that they feel overworked, they can't keep up with the workload of what we're doing. So I'm apprehensive to insert something that's going to need extreme regulatory oversight because this is taxpayer money. And if we're loaning it to other people, we need to be able to defend ourselves and better yet, have good tracking mechanisms and what we're going to do if people default. And I just think like it's probably a good idea for the future, but I would say probably not in the next 10 years. Are we even capable of issuing a defensible position like that when we still have all of this other work to do?
Director Hassan?
Okay, I have a question and then some comments. You ready, Nick? Where are you? There you are. Okay. Look, on the third, number 3, oh, you're right there. You focused most of that bullet point on housing and not economic development. Was that on purpose, not on purpose, just?
Yeah, not on purpose. We wanted to make sure at this point that we were articulating the concept of the broader public return on investment to make sure that we were noting that it's not just about the direct financial return. So, you know, if this moves forward, we would certainly be identifying more clearly what goes on into this consideration of the public return on investment. And I don't think we would be ranking or prioritizing any of these things, but just identifying that these are all things that the city is hoping to see and Bureau is hoping to see whenever you're making an investment in a project, the possible public positive outcomes.
Okay. Tomorrow is Wednesday. Okay, thanks. I just felt like when I read it, because it was so housing centric, like I'd like to see, right, like kind of just all of the things, because I think that somebody could read this and be like, oh, well, we can't do X, right? So that's something that was kind of coming to my mind. Counselor Duggar's comment on 4 and 5. Can we go to the next slide? I actually wondered, obviously we want to maximize proceeds. So I don't want to like say no, but could we add a line that says something like, unless there is a greater public benefit to doing so? Because like, yes, I think we should want to maximize. And we can also say as a body, like for this reason. So I'm just putting it out there, like other folks can weigh in. I liked the direction of where he was going, but I don't want to like limit the maximizing either.
Yeah, and just to comment on that, since it's come up twice now, we actually had 3 internal versions of these particular bullets here that started with maximize and then took out maximize and then added maximize back in with the caveat, you know, of the preamble of their subordinate to the other goals and things. So I think staff and myself are in line with your view on this. We just need to work on the wordsmithing to recognize we are prioritizing the program income in these situations, but it is still subordinate to these other goals. And the example that we gave is, you know, if you're looking to sell a site and somebody wants to, you get 2 bids, and one of them is an affordable housing complex with its own in-house community center, and the other is a mini storage facility. It doesn't matter if the mini storage facility can pay more. You're looking at what's going to do more to, you know, have that public benefit in downtown and achieve all of your other goals and objectives. And so, you know, generating revenue is great if all other things are equal, but oftentimes all other things are not equal. So,
okay. So, I mean, I'll let you be, right? But like when I was listening to Counselor Duggar, I wrote really quickly, unless there is a greater public benefit, right? So what is some language that we could use to sort of take what he has? And it sounds like you guys have been working through it. The last comment or question, and I'll try to say it as well as I can. Obviously we want, like to the mayor's point, like investments that have greater return, right? For our community, for this district. And I do support keeping it in the area. I think that makes sense. There's like 3 areas in Beaverton that I feel like we are slowly starting to invest in more. And I think that's like our communities of color, our LGBTQ plus community, and then like our, you know, our communities, gosh, I don't know the right way to say it. folks who identify with a disability. I'll say it like that. Is that a place that we would say stuff like that in the policy, or is that just kind of come later? Because a part of me, I just think of our equity initiatives and like, how do we direct the body that looks at this to really focus on like where more of the needs are and less on, you know, to your point, like this community center concept or like the building with a center and the housing, like, is there language that we could apply or could use that could help push that for the body that makes the decisions on it? Which, by the way, Councilor Duggar, when you were mentioning the comments, like, I think it's totally fine for us to like slightly restrict electeds. We've been really restricted a little bit, but that's just a joke I'm going to throw in there. So go ahead, Nick. What do you think?
No, I think that's certainly something that we can do. So right now, this is all teed up to just say, this is subordinate to all of your existing adopted policies and priorities. And so you have a DEI policy, and if you have official policies that support the LGBTQ community, then these would be subordinate to those. But maybe that's not strong enough. And one, maybe you don't have a policy in place that you feel does a good enough job of prioritizing those things. And this could be a place where you make that a priority. But also, even if it is subordinate to those existing priorities, you could choose to reiterate it here and say that when spending these dollars, priority should be given to pay attention to this. Or when looking at opportunities to generate these dollars, it's important for us to make sure that we aren't superseding our other priorities to invest in this. So you could certainly, if there's particular priorities that you want to make sure are emphasized here, we could articulate those more specifically than our simple bullet point number 2 of making this subordinate to other adopted Bureau and city goals and policies.
I do think it's worth exploring something about that. I don't know how deep, I want to go, and I want others to weigh in. And I know we're kind of probably wrapping up on the feedback, but I think there's something to be said because Councilor Duggar, like, we're awesome group here. And I think everyone, we have similar, for the most part, like values and ideals, but we don't know in 4 years and 10 years and 15 years, who would be making some of these decisions. And so I'm always trying to balance some direction without being overly restrictive. So I think that having some of that would be nice to see in the draft. Thank you. This was a lovely presentation and very informative.
Director Kim?
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. Always a very good presentation. I'm in agreement with Mayor Beatty. I think once we go outside of the plan and outside of the district, you just start to lose the original intent of why this is in place, which is to increase value within the district, or tax value. So I think it would be better if, certainly we don't know what's going to happen with the future board members, but I think I would like word something that emphasizes that we're very sensitive to that part. On public-private partnerships, public return on investments, just say we have in the short term a project and the developer is going to come in and do what makes economic sense for that site. And if we're interested in wanting the developer to say, as an example, put more of a public plaza that it has more amenities than what the developer is able to do financially, or affordable housing. I know that's happened at the round, but maybe make an investment on so that more of the units or some of the units will be affordable, or maybe developer needs an incentive to do mass timber, and maybe there are options. Like if there's a little bit more money, we could do mass timber and have 50% more density or whatever. Do we have flexibility to do something like that?
you have the flexibility. The question is, do you want a policy that maintains that flexibility? And I think the trade-off really gets down to, how many of these public-private partnership opportunities do you think are going to arise? And if it's going to be multiple projects a year and you're, relying on staff to negotiate specific terms, where on this one, we're trying to achieve the larger plaza and switching to mass timber construction style, but on this other one, we're trying to, negotiate more units of larger bedroom sizes and a lower affordability threshold or whatever the case is. Do you want to be negotiating all of these individual agreements with their own specific parameters, or do you want to put in place a specific policy that says, look, we're really trying to incentivize 4 things, and if a developer agrees to do one of the things, then we give them these loan terms. If they're doing 2 of the things, we give them these loan terms. And 3 and 4, you get these other more favorable terms. You can try to set up a specific program now that accomplishes very specific things and has low amounts of future negotiation that need to go on, and it's very clear and easy to participate in, and has a low amount of staff cost on an ongoing basis. Or you could set it up to be a specific negotiation with individual development opportunities as they arise. There isn't one approach that's better than the other. They just have their pros and cons in terms of staff time. But I think part of it depends on, well, how frequent do you actually expect that the city or that bureau is going to be approached by public-private partnerships, or that bureau might want to approach a private developer and offer this program. If it's going to be frequent, negotiating individual development agreements can be time consuming, and it can raise questions of fairness as, one developer says, hey, so-and-so got this many years for their amortization period. I only got this many years. Why did my terms get negotiated differently? So it's there again, the flexibility can be really helpful, but it can also be more time consuming and lead to these questions of fairness. There's not a right or wrong answer, but curious to hear your thoughts on what's most valuable.
Yeah, I don't know what's best way for the city to manage this, but I just see, especially if it's within a district, and if it's at a location, a key location, and if there are opportunities to add density, add public spaces, add affordability, or sustainability, or diversity somehow, that is not going to be done on by a private party, then it just seems like it'll be a good public return on investment. So, and I don't know how we get there, but I just see an opportunity.
Yeah, and an example, in the city of Wilsonville, they set up an urban renewal program. They call it the Win Zones, where they can have site-specific urban renewal areas that will pay rebates to developers there. And as part of that application process, they have a scoring system that says, if you're providing on-site childcare, you get this many points. If you're hiring through these local institutions, you get this many points. If you're a local business that's been in the community in operation for more than X number of years, you get this many points. And so they created a very kind of rigorous rubric that they use for giving points to particular applications, and based on those points determines the level of benefits that the businesses qualify for. So you could move to a situation like that, where you articulate up front all the public benefits that you're trying to achieve, and you award points for each of them that correspond with a level of benefits. That's a lot of upfront work as well. And so you may be better off just saying, well, let's set up a pilot program, and we're going to wait and see who the first developer is that comes in, and let's negotiate a development agreement there on a one-off basis. And based on what we learned there, we could set up a more rigorous program going forward. So I've heard a lot of support tonight for the concept of prioritizing loans. a lot of the work that I'm gonna have to be working on with city staff in November, December will be suggesting what the detailed parameters of that might look like for you all to consider when we come back in January.
And I'll just chime in, Nick and Roy. Thank you so much on that last point of conversation. And I think, yeah, I did want to sort of key into the Wilsonville example where you have site-specific areas that you're having those parameters for. I think the more you delve into very narrowed parameters, it gets more complex for the very large urban renewal districts that we have with various goals in certain sub areas. So we'll want to be careful as we filter down too far. I think the major goal of tonight is to address at a very high level and then go down. So thank you, Nick and Roy, for that.
Great, thanks, Janine. I think my feedback, I also, when I was reading the draft policy, the only part that I had real hesitancy at was the going beyond the geographic boundary. I think that where it is like an extension of plan area projects, and so like it's maybe something that like is bordering or, you know, like finishing off a project that is like along the border, I'm comfortable with that in terms of using the funds to facilitate other objectives or goals. Like I'm also remembering when we're doing our 5-year action plan and kind of going back to what were those commitments that we made to our community and to our partners. And so I'm also uncomfortable kind of going too much beyond that. I understand that legally the program income is where we have the most flexibility. And generally, I think this plan gives us a lot of great flexibility and with guidance on where our priorities should be. So for me, the only thing that really gave me pause was around kind of going outside of the geographic boundary. Also, definitely more interested in loans than in grants. However, I foresee us needing the program income to continue, delivering against Bureau's program goals, right? When costs of land or development and things continue to go up, I think we're going to need the program income potentially to continue to get after our goals. So I'm hoping it just helps us kind of expand what's possible within the goals that we established back in 2011 of what we would do, and helping get after those things that we as this board set in our next 5-year priorities. On the one slide about parking for the fund, where it's like the reserve fund. So yeah, this I don't know what it should be, like if it's like a couple of years of maintenance and operating expense, something where we know that we're going to be able to keep this asset in really good condition for the life of the asset. So I really appreciate this piece of it. And then whatever that target amount is, to me, is just making sure that this is a very healthy and well-maintained asset that we have. I'm curious also if if this reserve fund is also would be helping take care of the units, the retail units below, right? Is that also in scope of how we're taking care of this facility?
We'll need to check with your parking staff on that question. I know that they have been working on a study to look at the reserve requirements here and to see whether that piece does include the retail spaces in addition to the garage itself.
Yeah, I'll just chime in, Nick. It does not. The reserve study is for the parking spaces and those decks, not the retail spaces.
Okay. So I don't know if, I know it's the same asset, like, it's one physical space. So I'm curious if like the parking revenue that, after we've met all of the parking goals with it, should any excess then be put in like a reserve fund for the units, or, how else are we making sure that part of Bureau's asset is also really well maintained and taken care of? So I think that's, and I don't know if that kind of falls within like I mean, I would think it doesn't fall within TIF because like now it's built and exists. So I think that that's maybe something I would just like to make sure that we're conscientious of is this is a pretty large investment that we've made. Let's make sure that the whole thing is maintainable and will last into the future. All right. Are there any other questions, Janine or Nick, that you have for the group? It looks like we've caught everyone's name in the chat.
I think that was great feedback tonight. We will hear from URAC in a couple of weeks, and then Tyler, Janine, and I, as well as many other members of your staff, will have plenty to discuss as we work on more detailed language to come back at the beginning of the year. So thank you all.
Thank you so much. All right, and our next agenda item is the Executive Director's Report. Andy, do you have anything for us tonight?
Well, first of all, thank you all very much for the great conversation on 2 important topics tonight. And thanks to the staff, Molly, Casey, Tyler, and Janine for all the work they put into those 2 topics, and to finance for having some comments on that program and income discussion. It's very important. I'll just highlight a few brief items here for the board. The Beaverton shelter is wrapping up construction in November, and there will be a ribbon cutting and public tours planned next month. We anticipate shelter guests will be moving in by the end of the year, so that's a very important milestone for the community rapidly approaching. The Mill Creek development on Western and Fifth, called Modera Raleigh, has received temporary occupancy this past month, and heading into the final stretch of moving people in to that building, and it has 270 units there. So there's a lot of activity happening there as well. Our transportation system plan update, that group held a community engagement activity downtown at the city library over this past weekend. It had over 80 participants, so it was well attended to do a lot of hands-on activity with the community as they envision the future of the transportation system. One of the activities you'll see in the project area update, closing out previous brownfield program, the economic development staff is putting together another EPA brownfield application for $500,000 to really assess brownfield opportunity areas around Beaverton, especially in the Bureau area. And that's due next month, but they're putting a lot of work into really honing in that grant application. For that and other updates, yeah, please check out the report at the end of the agenda. The next Bureau meeting is November 12th. That will be a relatively short meeting because we'll be sharing that evening with the City Council that night, but there will be an executive session to discuss an important item. URAC, their next meeting will be a tour of the Cedar Hills Crossing and all the development activity that's been happening there. Should be a fun evening. That's going to be November 4th. If any Bureau board members are interested in attending that, just let me or let Tyler know. We should be able to accommodate that, but that'll be the evening of November 4th. And lastly, I think Tyler's still online. I think he wanted to say a few words to wrap us up tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Well, this is the sad but exciting last moment for one of our members, Cassandra Olvin, who is retiring from the Tuolumne Valley Fire and Rescue this month, and this is her last board meeting. Mayor alluded to it earlier tonight that 2011, you were one of the original folks with Mayor getting out, pounding the streets and talking to community and figuring out what's best, not only for your district, but also how it can really improve what's going on and what we've seen in the revitalization of our downtown. Cassandra, thank you. We appreciate your time, not only those early years being a part of the URAC, and then the last couple of years here with the Beaverton Urban Redevelopment Agency, but you've been instrumental not only for our community, our region, for urban renewal, and of course at the state level. And we're gonna totally miss you. I will be stopping by your office to give you a nice little gift. And so be expecting that this week. Hopefully, you're still obviously in the office tonight, but hopefully later on this week you will continue to be there. But thank you, and hope you have such an exciting next chapter of your life very, very soon.
Hey, thank you so much. I've been so impressed. I know I've said this a bunch of times, but Beaverton has really been the model of how it can be done really, really well. And I think that's because of the longevity of staff, the commitment, all the really thoughtful practitioners that have been with the city, like Tyler and team. So it's been an honor, and it's really fun to see all these aspirations actually come to fruition. So you guys do a great job. And I think Mayor Beatty has said a number of times that making Beaverton a place that people want to go, right? When they live there, it really is. It's a place to go. There are times that we have gone to Beaverton, even though we live on the east side, that we would have previously gone to Portland and enjoyed things. So I just admire all of you. You're all so smart. I sometimes feel like I'm the one like, so, oh, I just have one lane that I'm always looking through. You're all so gifted with the way that you look at everything. So it's pretty inspirational as far as having such great people looking out for the interests of your community. So thanks for the great time. It's been really fun. And my hope is that my colleague is going to be having a conversation with the mayor, Corinne Haining, should she be chosen to participate. She's really sharp, and I think will continue to contribute. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Director Olvin. I don't know if this is like retirement for you, but I recently learned that the Spanish word for retired is jubilada, which then I loved because, you know, Jubilee in English. And I was like, I think we should just start using that because what a great way to say it. So thank you for your service to Beaverton and to our community and through all your years at TVFNR. We're so lucky to have you. And yeah, just a huge thank you. It looks like Director Teeter would like to say something.
Yeah, Cassandra, it's been really great sharing the past couple of years with you. I've got a question for Andy, so if anybody else wants to share anything for Cassandra, then you can go first.
All right. Here's Director Teeter.
Okay, thanks. Andy, you don't have to answer right now, but this could be good follow-up information for Bureau later on. I've just heard talk of FEMA making some new floodplain regulation statements, and I think it'd be helpful for us to know how those might impact us and some of our creekside planning and development planning, especially in the Beaverton Central area, as we get some more clarity about what that's looking like in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Director Teeter. It's an issue I kind of went back and forth on really diving into tonight because it's something our planning manager, Anna Slatinsky, has a much firmer grasp on. But the short of it is that FEMA has instructed all of the participating National Flood Insurance Program participants in Oregon, which there's over 260 of them, that there are measures that every community will have to implement starting before the end of this year to comply with some of the new floodplain regulations that FEMA is intending to roll out next year in response to previous lawsuits from environmental groups. This really has to relate to claims that FEMA and the NFIP, the insurance program, are not protecting salmon habitat through allowing fill activities in a lot of development areas. So that's kind of the extent of how I can explain things. We are having a work session with council, and there's a memo right now with the city manager's office. She's reviewed it yesterday that will be going out to council with further details. But we've been working with League of Oregon Cities, DLCD, Washington County, Clean Water Services on kind of what is coming through in this. And I was just at League of Oregon Cities last week attending a session on this, and the consensus is that it's going to be nearly impossible for communities to comply with these pre-implementation measures that FEMA is requesting in a very, very short amount of time, like literally a few months for communities to either make code updates or come up with new programs to work with the development community. But we'll do our best, and we will certainly be briefing the council on all of that next month. I believe that we have a work session scheduled for November 19th in that truncated work month.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's also important to know that the mayors have been meeting with collectively, the Washington County mayors met with Congresswoman Bonamici on this exact topic, and the Metropolitan Mayors Consortium, which is the mayors of the 3 largest counties, have met with their federal delegation too. And this is definitely a federal issue. And so the mayors have been very proactive on working with the delegation to try to preempt this because, as we know, FEMA does not act fast in any scenario besides this one in which they want us to do something in 4 months.
Yeah. What she said.
Any other questions for Andy or Tyler? All right, with that, we are adjourned. As mentioned, our next bureau meeting is November 12th, so we'll see you there.